Today for the Continuous Driver Monitoring webinar hosted by Diesa and our partner Samba Safety. Speaking to you all today will be Steve Howell, Associate Vice President of Diesa Transportation Compliance, and Eric Waldinger, Chief Marketing Officer at Samba Safety. A few housekeeping items before we get started today. All attendees will be receiving a copy of today's presentation slides and the recording of the webinar. If you have any questions during the presentation, you may submit your question in the comment section. We will be answering questions following the presentation if time allows, and will follow up on all questions submitted after the webinar. There will be a short survey at the end, and you can let us know how we did today. And with that, let me introduce you to Diesa's Transportation Compliance Associate VP with over 20 years of experience, Steve Howell.
Thank you so much, Mackenzie, and welcome everyone to today's webinar called Diesa's Continuous Driver Monitoring and Controlling Foreseeable Risks. So, you know, when I read that title, two words immediately jumped out, and that was monitoring and risk. You know, those are such important words when we consider the industries we serve and the relationships to the compliance and safety. So if you think about the challenges we face today, it's critical to consider ways to balance and mitigate risks. Uncertain times like today reinforces our most important assets. Those are the employees and the drivers. So how can we become a better company? One way to protect our workforce and ourselves, which will enable us to become an even safer and more profitable business, is looking at the importance of driver monitoring. Now, whenever I attend a webinar, I always ask myself, what am I going to get out of this discussion? So for today, you'll learn a little bit about Diesa, but don't worry, only at a high level. And then we'll tackle the risk, the impact, and then look at solutions by which Diesa driver monitoring can really help you. So we'll conclude the webinar with a quick little recap and QA as well. So now let's begin. Thank you. Often we hear, who is Diesa? You know, what does Diesa do? That's because we're in so many different critical places within our energy and transportation industry that it can be a little confusing, especially with all the acquisition companies that we've gained over the years. But feel free to visit our website to see the progression of our company and to see what we're so proud of. However, if I kind of keep it very simple and state it, we are an innovative technology and people company, really implementing a suite of compliance solutions. Yes, I use the word people because we're here to serve and deliver an unexpectedly high level of customer service intended to really wow our clients. So another way to say it, you know, we're here to simply keep people safer. But all of this didn't happen overnight. So with over 34 years in business, we've learned a lot. We keep listening, growing, and in return, we continue to share our solutions. So for example, our products portfolio consists of employee screening, background checks, driver qualification files, drug and alcohol programs, occupational health programs. That's including physical exams, fit tests, physical ability tests, and then transportation asset management programs. It includes license and permitting, fuel tax, and so much more. So again, now we're proud to offer driver monitoring. So yes, we strive to be the most complete and holistic portfolio of compliance products. We serve a vast array of clients, from your small or single owner operators to large international corporations. And now we're extremely pleased to offer our Diesa driver monitoring program with our partner, Samba Safety. We truly formed an incredible partnership based on a similar ideology and a passion for quality and service. So yeah, our goal is to really leverage our combined technology of expertise to provide a seamless experience that makes the Diesa driver monitoring program so special. So, oh, by the way, my contact information will be posted at the end. So if you want to learn more about some of the products that I rattled off really quick, please just reach out. But let's just jump right into the topic for today. Here's a good question, right? Do we face challenges in the transportation industry? The answer is absolutely. There's a lot of them. For instance, FMCSA Clearinghouse. Yes, ultimately it will serve our industry well, but we all know of the growing pains in the last year, and we're still waiting to see what the future is going to hold for us going forward. We also have the ELD mandate, which continues to be another added requirement that's affecting our industry, but it's also holding us more accountable. Then we're affected by, say, outside forces, increased road congestion, bottlenecks, work zone, traffic, control devices, 80% increase in those just in the last decade or so. And then, of course, there's distracted driving. Another one, texting, cell phones, more than 3,000 lives lost per year. So you kind of get the picture. All of these are big distractions, but what's truly important? It's the ability to focus on the overall health of our organization or your organization. Understanding the current state, the future state of your operations is critical to foreseeing the upcoming challenges and hurdles ahead. For example, I trust you don't want unexpected breakdowns when you're on the road. So what do? You start to monitor and manage your maintenance records. But what do you do about your drivers? Is it just a yearly MVR check? That raises the next question. Have you ever looked at the impact of good drivers versus bad drivers? Okay, jump right into that. So for starters, let's break it down into three main buckets: safety and compliance, brand protection, and then risk and cost. Yes, those are all very important, but it can be further broken down into 12 critical scenarios. For example, let's look at regarding safety and insurance, the effects of poor safety records that relates to rising insurance costs forces companies like Celadon and many more to close their doors. Negative press. Last thing you want to see is your logo or company name involved in a crash or a lawsuit. Although we like to see the name when things go well, it's very scary when things go wrong. So all this can lead to loss in revenue and lower market share. So what else do poor drivers affect? Well, it really does affect employee retention and recruitment. I mean, we know that data from ATA, 89% turnover rate for the for hire truckload carriers. I think it's up in the 70s for the smaller fleets. That's a lot of recruiting, a big expense, and a lot of time invested. And that time lost is not putting them on the road. So our interest is your interest. Keep drivers driving and in compliance. So none of the ones I just mentioned is any less important than the other, but any one can ruin a business or an individual. Therefore, again, it really behooves us to learn and monitor those behaviors which can mitigate these impacts. So now let's kind of get a little more granular with the value of Diesa driver monitoring program. We're speaking about a continuous driver speaking of continuous driver monitoring that automatically alerts you when an employee driving on behalf of your company receives a negative violation, right? You receive insight on up-to-date motor vehicle records, helping you better understand who's behind the wheel. But a standard MVR is a snapshot of time. It's a current record. But what happens tomorrow or the rest of the 364 days of the year? That's what we call visibility gap, which is risk. So now you can monitor. Yes, those are the two important words I mentioned earlier today. So in turn, we're seeking to really increase the employee retention by intervention and enforcing your driver safety policies. So ultimately, you're going back to what I mentioned at the beginning, protect your company, your employees, and our communities. But so at this point, I think it's a perfect time to kind of hand off to a very special partner of ours, Eric at Samba Safety. As we're both leaders in the industry, we join forces to offer a best-in-class monitoring system. So without further ado, our partner, Eric, CMO at Samba Safety. Hey, it's all yours. Please take us away. Thank you.
Hey, Steve, thank you so much. I appreciate it and excited to talk to you guys today. Really I wanted to talk as we get into some of the stats before I jump into this. It's just, what is driver monitoring? And in this case, we're really talking driver license monitoring. So when you look at the big umbrella of the world of risk today, and I see my buddy Steve Wilhelms is on the call, who probably taught me more than anything else in this space, is, look, you've got all these different competing technologies. You've got your telematics providers that are providing you data around not necessarily the safety components as much as what's your route management. You have in-dash cameras that tell you what's happening if somebody distracted. And there's all these different safety technologies that live within the hub of the car or the truck today. What we're talking about is the data to tell you who should get behind the wheel. All of those technologies are phenomenal at telling you what's happening while they're in your asset, but they don't necessarily tell you what's happening and who should be in the actual car themselves. And so when you look at the overall kind of stats of the people who get behind the wheel between the data that we pull and that Diesa pulls, look at 94% of the crashes are a result of human behavior. So we look at the difference between crashes and accidents as a different thing. An accident is something that cannot be prevented. A crash is something that could. So human behavior means that, were they speeding? Was there failure to obey? Was it distracted driving? It's not necessarily weather or a breakdown in the automobile or the truck itself. It's things that could be prevented. But more importantly, there's some basic stuff out there. Like on average, 3 to 5% of your employee base have an invalid driver's license today, meaning that they are driving a vehicle for your organization and their license could be suspended or it could be invalid. Now, it could be suspended for some of the what I would consider most innocuous reasons on the planet. It could be that they didn't pay a parking ticket. Now, do we think that someone who doesn't pay a parking ticket has more risk than someone who has had 3 speeding tickets, 10 plus? No. But do we know that there's a correlation between having a suspended driver's license and a crash? That's an unequivocal yes. And usually it's because there's life events that are happening that I'll talk a little bit about. The thing that's really shocking on this is that 19% of fatalities involve an invalid driver license. And again, the correlation between something happening in someone's personal life, not being able to potentially afford to fix some of the things on their licenses or some other circumstances are things that we need to be able to dig in as safety and risk and HR professionals. The other thing is 41% of the crashes are due to inattentive driving. We know that distracted driving is a huge piece, but it's not just distracted driving. It might be that you are on the, jamming out to the radio to your favorite song. My wife actually makes fun of me because I may every once in a while jam out to Justin Bieber, although I should not announce that in public. It happens. But if I'm not paying attention and I'm on the road and I'm singing and I'm dancing, I'm not paying attention. My hands aren't at 10-2 and I'm not really focusing on my safe driving. Some of the other things are, fatalities involved in 26% of fatalities involved in speeding, meaning that the faster you drive, we look at frequency and severity, the more severe that the crashes can become. And then what's interesting is 39% is alcohol as a contributing factor to crashes. However, it is significantly lower now for the first time in 2020, moving to 2021 is distracted driving. Distracted driving has taken over that area. So understanding what's happening within your crash behavior, understanding that you can affect who is behind the wheel and how they drive is a big piece. So if we move to the next slide, there's also a significant business impact. When you think about the world today and you think about all the different things that come into a cost of a crash for your organization, couple key things. One, there's a 130% increase in the annual cost of auto repair. I mean, just the cost of goods and services continue to go up, but the cost of goods and services also apply to healthcare. So you have healthcare costs rising, you have the physical cost of fixing your car rising, but you have all of these different outside sources. So it's costly to be able to get new people in. Turnover has a huge impact, and you guys can look at this. But if you think of it this way, let's say on average, you have a 100-person driving force. And we know 20% on a yearly basis are going to get into an accident, whether it's a fender bender or whether it's more severe. Instantly 20 people within that population are going to get into a crash. Well, if the average cost of a crash without bodily harm is $17,500, and the average cost of a crash with bodily harm is $75K, because this keeps increasing, we're talking about a pretty significant base. So let's just call it 18 accidents or 18 crashes do not involve bodily injury. Not great at math, but let's just round up and call it 18 times 20. You're looking at pretty significant cost of just fixing a car and making sure you move on. But if you've got two people who you've gotten into a crash with bodily harm, you're looking at another 150K. So in aggregate, you're looking about, for every 100 drivers, you're looking at a minimum of $500,000 per 100 drivers just to fix and to move everything out. That doesn't cost the, include the cost of lost wages, lost anything else across the board. We've just got some interesting things to go there. Again, you've got more crashes, more cost, and more impact that comes in on a daily basis. We want to move to the next slide. The other thing is just your legal risk. There is a huge change in the world around the cost of litigation financing. And many of you on this call may be familiar with it, but litigation financing is now PE-backed litigation, which is a little scary to all of us, meaning that these PE firms are now investing in trying to get your claims to court because they believe they can make money. And so there's been this huge proliferation on this litigation financing. In addition to 1 in 2 crashes, personal injury involve an auto accident. And so when you put all of these legal risks together, there's summary judgments that get higher. There's the negligence entrustments, which I don't think I need to talk about too deep with everybody on this call. But the idea that there are things that you can do as an organization to mitigate these legal risk. And the biggest thing you can do, as we talk about the driver monitoring, it gives you visibility. It's not obviously the end all and be all, but if you can start showing that you have processes in place that are monitoring your drivers, monitoring your employee base, and understanding should they be behind the wheel, it literally starts lowering the bar, raising the bar for lawsuits or for your legal risk. If we can move to the next one. One of the things that we look at from Diesa and Samba Safety is really the driver profile. This is really the core to what our monitoring allows you to do. This is where you want to understand, does the driver fit to your policy? So the first thing that all of you guys do through Diesa is the identify and monitor piece. Or the identify piece, which is you're pulling pre-hire MVRs while you're trying to get people hired, or if you've got CSA, DOT compliance, you're pulling them once a year. This is what we consider the basis of being able to just understand, should someone be behind the wheel? But what it doesn't do is tell you the whole story. And I'm going to get into visibility gap in a few minutes. But from our standpoint, it's how do you identify and monitor? The second stage is how do you manage it? So how do you understand on a daily basis, do you have the right people in? What's your risk profile look like? What is your claims and loss data? Like, what are the actual behaviors that are happening in the day-to-day basis? And some of that happens in driver monitoring. Some of that may happen with your insurance organizations. But the question I ask you guys is, do you guys have a robust way to be able to identify and then monitor the drivers behind it? The third stage is really being able to modify behavior. And so we've got our new product that called Corda University that's come out that is really around driver training. Once you understand the baseline, once you understand how people are driving, are you able to modify the behavior? Whether it is, again, identifying that someone has an invalid license, or you understand that they're speeding, 3 times in the last 5 years, or 3 times in the last 5 months, it's a very different profile. So we want to be able to give you the visibility and the transparency to be able to modify that behavior. The last piece is really around being able to reduce crashes by using all of the data, whether it's predictive analytics, whether it is your policy score. The question is, are you able to combine driver data? If you have CSA data, do you understand how that CSA data rolls into it? If you also have your insurance crash and claims data, Do you have a 360-degree view of your driver behavior, and do you understand your risk? And so what driver license monitoring is in this context is getting all the information to make the right decisions at the right time with the right people. So if we move to the next slide, I want to talk a lot about the visibility gap. So the visibility gap is what happens today. In many organizations, they pull motor vehicle records once a year, which is great in a snapshot in time. The problem is, as we look at all the legal implications and we look at all the financial implications to a crash, is you fly blind after that second day. So if I'll use Eric Waldinger as an example, and this is not a real example. You pull my MVR. 2 months later, I speed. 4 months later, I get a DUI, and 6 months later, I have a suspended license. Many organizations are working on the honor system saying, look, Eric, it is your responsibility to tell my organization that you have a suspended license or you had a DUI. But it's my job. I don't really want to tell anybody. I'm a little worried about what the implications might be. And I do it quietly. And then at month 9, I get into a crash. Well, now all of a sudden the liability is in your organization because you should have had, and again, this is the legal definition, you should have had the processes in place to understand that Eric Waldinger had a suspended license, should not be driving for work, but I did. Now, my organization's liable, my insurance company is going to get involved, my premiums are going to go through the roof, and quite frankly, I'm probably going to settle out of court because it was my responsibility to understand that Eric Waldinger was behind that wheel. Some of you may be more progressive and do it quarterly. The problem is you still have that same visibility. You may have missed events that happen in between. So if my license is suspended, I'm driving for your organization, again, your liability and your risk is there. With continuous driver monitoring, we take that risk out because what happens is you pull your MVR, and in this case, you're with Diesa, you've got a pre-hire MVR. We can start monitoring the first day that is an employee of your organization. And what tells you then is it continuously will tell you, hey, look, Eric Waldinger was speeding, or I had a failure to obey, or I got, unfortunately, a DUI, and you can create that intervention. And why this is important is because it's not necessarily always punitive. I use this great example. We were working with an energy organization out of Dallas. And this was probably my second week at Samba Safety, where I spoke to the head of safety and compliance. And he told me this amazing story, which is, what driver monitoring's allowed them to do is increase retention. So they had a driver who in a 3-month period was very close to being suspended because he was outside their safety, the safety profile. So instead of saying, what's happening to this gentleman, the HR actually sat them down and said, look, something's going on. And we just want to know what's going on with your life because we see that your driving has changed significantly over the last few months. And this is a proud gentleman, and he kind of kept to himself. And, he literally started crying in the middle of this conversation. And it was really impactful because what they learned is that, unfortunately, his wife was undergoing chemotherapy. He didn't tell anybody about the plight of what was going in his personal life. He just kind of drove and did his business, but he was distracted. So the organization had no idea. What they were able to do instantly, though, is put a plan in place. They gave him 30-day leave and said, look, we want you to take care of your wife. We want you to make sure that you literally were able to take the time, get focused, and do the things you needed to do for your family. Well, this gentleman obviously appreciated it very much. And over the next 3 years from that point forward, not only was he their best driver, he was their best recruiter. So somewhere in the neighborhood of 10% of the drivers came from this one individual because he told the story. And without driver monitoring and having the conversations in the right way, they would have never been able to change that driver behavior. Most organizations would have said, hey, it's 3 strikes, you're out. This organization took the visibility gap, took the monitoring, and changed the way in which they coached and used this to help provide better insights to every organization, or to their organization. So if we can move to the next slide, not only is there's this personal impact, and Steve talked a little bit about this, but the data is really telling us some real information. When you start driver monitoring, and this is not putting in telematics, this is not putting in any of the training and development pieces. This is just the Hawthorne effect. If you tell people you're monitoring, you will see on average a 22% reduction in monthly violations. You will see 14% reduction in monthly crashes. And you will see a 32% reduction in risk profile. So what all of this means, it's cost savings. It's, again, if I look at 100 driver base, 20% of those are going to get on a crash on a yearly basis. Reducing that 14% essentially means you've removed 3 crashes just by doing monitoring without any intervention. That has significant impact to what your insurance carriers are going to do, what your brokers can do, and overall the risk profile across the board. We also know that being able to streamline these administrative processes, again, from pre-hire all the way through to monitoring, means that you're spending less time trying to identify what happened in what area, because we know that a code for speeding in Mississippi might be a different code for speeding in California. So it normalizes your data and allows you to get all this information in, but it also can bring in your CSA data. So you've got a dashboard across the board to see what's happening for every single one of your drivers. We can move to the last one, or kind of the summary of driver benefits are, look, we want to be able to help you improve your driver behavior. We want to help you reduce your crash and claims costs. We want to make sure we can streamline the administrative safety policy. But more importantly, we just want to help you keep your drivers, and we want to make them the drivers better throughout every one of your organizations. Subsequent piece is just really around the brand enhancement. It's being able to understand, what the impact to your brand is. Finally, if we go to the last slide here, is just kind of benchmark. And so I know we've got a lot of energy and transportation organizations on here. So we wanted to show you real life data. This is the benchmark for 2018 for organizations who were not monitoring. On average, the violation percent was 19% of the driver base of the unmonitored drivers had a violation. Action, meaning that there was something that they had to take, almost 8% of the base had an action that needed to take. Now, again, since we were pulling pre-hire MVRs or MVRs only once a year, when we talk about that visibility gap, there was a big gap. In major violations, meaning big crashes, speeding over 15 miles an hour, over the speed limit, over 5% of the base had major violations. As you look at a 2-year monitoring gap, once they started monitoring, these same organizations saw a significant decrease in 2019 and a further decrease in 2020. Now, keep in mind, we know that there was less congestion on the road, but that doesn't mean that violations didn't increase or change, because again, there were less people on the road, but we saw more speeding, we saw more severity. But within the monitored groups, you saw the highest decrease in violation, action, and major, but also you saw a higher clean percentage of MVR. And what clean means is you've got no violations or you've got nothing on your record. So year over year, when you look at driver monitoring and the impact it has to an organization, it's pretty clear on how you can make your company safer, how you can lower your risk, and how you can keep your employees better on the road, moving faster and moving goods and services, or really making sure you get the best people on the road for your organization. So I think that was the end of the actual slides, but we wanted to be able to spend about 15 minutes on questions and answers, and hopefully this was helpful for you guys.
Hey, excellent, Eric. Appreciate the deep dive into driver monitoring. I'm great, impactful stories too, and I'm also glad to hear that that's not truly your driver record, because that did scare me a little bit. So good that wasn't real there.
Yeah.
At this point, again, I want to thank everyone for joining, and again, delighted to work with you and your companies implementing important programs for you. My contact information is soon follow. Do we have a couple minutes to answer a question or two? Mackenzie, I know we're kind of right at that time.
Yes. So thank you so much, Eric and Steve. We do have a few questions that we can get to today. And just a reminder, if you did submit a question and we aren't able to get to it in the live portion, we will be following up with every person individually to get you your answer. So our first question we have today is, how does continuous driver monitoring work with CSA data? What's the intersection?
So great question. I mean, I think that there's a pretty significant intersection. So, you know, there's the regulations of having to pull a annual motor vehicle record through with the FMCSA and CSA data, but a lot of these live in disparate systems. So you might understand what's happening if you go to the FMCSA portal, or if you're using technology to pull CSA data. You may know what's happening in that world of CSA, but you may not know if somebody has a suspended license. Being able to combine your CSA data with the driver monitoring data allows you to get that full picture. You know, they may be really good at ensuring that the air pressure is right in the tires, but once they leave their cab, they may be a terrible driver outside of that. And so understanding that full picture of, you know, are you in CSA compliance, but also are you in compliance on your day-to-day driving? You're not always in a cab. You're not always driving for work. And you want to make sure that you have a dashboard and you've got data that pulls all of that together. And that's part of when you look at the different processes that we have and some of the different products that Samba offers with Diesa, is being able to have the FMCSA monitored, pulled, as well as having your driver's license monitoring pulled in one dashboard in one place. And it just makes your administrative burden so much less.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Eric. We have another question. How do your two companies, Diesa and Samba Safety, work together?
Hey, Eric, I'll jump in on that one. Again, another great question. Both companies invested their time, their effort, and created and built an integration together, you know, whereby we really set up and order the drive monitoring programs and manage the rosters all within the Diesa environment, regardless of the platform. Diesa Works, if you're familiar with that, or the AWSI D360 platform. So either of them, we have an integration going through. So it's, again, a great value of streamlining reporting, the ordering, and monitoring within the Diesa world. Again, driven to you by, you know, via technology, we're linked together.
All right, thank you so much, Steve. And then looks like we have time for one more question. How do these solutions fit in the overall scope of background checks, criminal data, and monitoring?
Oh, okay. I'll start that one, Eric, if that makes sense.
Absolutely.
Hey, another great question. You know, think of this, just kind of mentioned, a true integrated solution, you know, where Diesa and Samba are transacting their roster management, MVR monitoring, all within the Diesa platform. Example, if you're already using background checks and drug testing and include our DQ process, now it all falls under the platform for better efficiency and accuracy, and really, more importantly, accountability. So, you know, it allows for better and quicker decision-making on your end. Again, driving that one place for true accountability. Just some ideas there.
Yeah, no, I mean, I would say the other thing is just being able to give you guys the data to make the right decisions for employees. We understand that there are many organizations out there that really truly want to be data-driven organizations. And this, you know, being able to have monitoring solutions coupled with background screening, you know, coupled with your pre-hire process, allows you to invest in the right people at the right time. And, you know, again, our goal is to help you make your employees better and help make good decisions, because we want to make sure we can continue to get the best employee retention and, you know, help support your business. And so, you know, all of that while lowering risk and, you know, being able to both mitigate the risk and lower your risk profile. While we didn't talk a lot connectivity to your insurance organizations, but there's a lot of connectivity to having lower crashes with lower claims and lower costs. So hopefully this is beneficial for you guys. I know we're a little bit over time, but you know, Diesa, I thank you guys for your partnership, and for the attendees, thank you guys for joining. If there's any questions you have, we will make sure we follow up with some content afterwards.
And I'll also say thank you very much. Here's our contact information. Again, two important words: monitoring and reducing risk, right? By monitoring, we can reduce the risk and save you time, resources, and money. So with that, again, all of us say thank you very much for joining, and hopefully we'll be speaking soon. Take care, everyone. Thank you.